Some time ago, a woman came to see me. She was 57, married more than 30 years, respected at church and steady at home. People described her as dependable, wise, the one who held everything together. She told me she had been emotionally quiet in her marriage for nearly 12 years. Not resentful, not distant, just careful. Years earlier, during a vulnerable season, she broke her husband's confidence. He forgave her. They kept building their life, but she never truly released herself from it. After that, every disagreement felt like proof she had lowered her standing. So she stopped initiating hard conversations, stopped expressing disappointment, stopped saying, I don't think I have the right to ask for closeness anymore, she told me calmly. From the outside, their life looked stable. Inside, she was living on self-imposed probation, convinced one mistake had permanently reduced her voice. And she believed that restraint was maturity. When she first shared her story, I closed my Bible and sat quietly for a moment. Not because I lacked counsel, but because I recognized the weight she had been carrying for years. Women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s carry guilt differently than they did at 30. It is quieter, less reactive, settles into identity. It begins to shape how they measure their worth. And yet, I have watched the Lord gently reorder that internal structure many times. In Isaiah 45, God speaks with steady authority. He does not panic over human failure. He does not renegotiate his sovereignty. He declares who he is. There is something deeply stabilizing about that for a mature woman. If you recognize yourself in this kind of hidden guilt, I hope this can be a thoughtful place for reflection. Many women here are seasoned, serious about growth, and committed to living with clarity and dignity. If this conversation resonates, you are welcome to subscribe so we can continue exploring these stories together. If you feel comfortable, share your city and state in the comments. It is meaningful to see where women are listening from. If you have carried guilt longer than necessary, you are not alone. You may simply be in the middle of being reshaped. She arrived 10 minutes early. Not 5. Not 15. 10. The kind of punctuality that signals control without appearing rigid. In the waiting room, she sat upright, ankles crossed, handbag closed neatly beside her. Her coat was folded carefully over her arm. She stood before I called her name. Her handshake was firm. Her smile brief. Once seated, she did not fidget or scan the room. She placed both hands in her lap and looked directly at me. I made a decision years ago that harmed my marriage, she said. I repented. I apologized. But I don't believe the consequence ever fully lifted. Her tone was steady, almost instructional. She explained everything chronologically. Dates, context, the emotional climate at the time. She acknowledged loneliness but did not dwell on it. She did not blame her husband. In fact, she protected him carefully in her language. What she said was thoughtful. What she did not say was telling. She never once described her own hurt. She detailed his disappointment, his caution afterward. But when I asked how she felt during that season, she paused briefly and said, "It doesn't matter. I made the mistake." There it was. For women with her temperament, responsibility can quietly erase self-examination. As she continued, a pattern emerged. Whenever the conversation moved toward forgiveness, she redirected it toward consequence. When I mentioned growth, she mentioned damage. "I understand why trust never fully returned," she said. "That's fair. Fair." She spoke as though she were still presenting evidence in court. There was no bitterness in her voice, but there was a tightening around her mouth whenever I used words like restoration or new season. She had accepted pardon in theory, but she had sentenced herself in practice. She was living faithfully but cautiously, loving but restrained, serving but from a lowered internal position. I did not see a rebellious woman. I saw a capable one who had concluded that one failure permanently lowered her ceiling, and she had adjusted her life accordingly. She woke at 5:30 every morning. Not because she had to. The children were grown. Her husband was semi-retired. But she preferred the quiet order of early light. Coffee at the same strength. Bible open. A legal pad beside it filled with tidy handwriting. She liked starting ahead of everyone else. It gave her steadiness. By 7 o'clock, breakfast was ready. By 8:30, the dishwasher was empty. If she volunteered at church, she arrived early and prepared. If she met a friend for lunch, she listened more than she spoke. Nothing looked strained. But her temperament was strong and decisive. She had led committees, managed finances, navigated family crises. In earlier years, she initiated difficult conversations. After the breach in her marriage, something shifted. She still led publicly, but at home she stopped initiating. This is where a particular kind of silence can take root in long American marriages. Not dramatic silence. Strategic restraint. If her husband seemed distracted, she did not ask why. If he forgot something meaningful, she let it go. If she felt insecure, she kept it to herself. She called it respect. Maturity. Over time it became autopilot. Her strong temperament, which once moved toward conflict to resolve it, now moved away from it to avoid reopening old wounds. Any hint of tension triggered the same internal script. Do not make this worse. Do not ask for more. Do not risk another fracture. So she absorbed. When he was quiet, she busied herself. When he was critical, she improved performance. When she felt distance, she increased service. At 25, conflict feels explosive. At 55, it feels dangerous. She had concluded that one mistake forfeited her right to seek reassurance. And because she was competent, no one questioned her silence. In public, she was warm and articulate. At church, she taught about communication and grace. But in her kitchen, when a conversation edged toward vulnerability, her body stiffened. Once, describing a disagreement, she said, "It wasn't important." Her jaw tightened. What would have happened if it had been important? I asked. She exhaled slowly. I don't think I have that right anymore. A quiet demotion. Instead of expressing frustration, she improved performance. Instead of expressing need, she increased reliability. Instead of expressing hurt, she rehearsed accountability. Her marriage looked calm. Inside, she lived with constant self-monitoring. Not because her husband was harsh, but because guilt convinced her that stability depended on her restraint. Silence felt virtuous, but safety built on self-suppression slowly starves intimacy. She was not dramatic. She was disciplined, and her strength had become the very mechanism keeping her distant. When I think of her now, I do not think of the mistake that brought her to my office. I think of the evening she chose to speak instead of withdraw, the moment she set a boundary calmly, the steady consistency that followed. Her marriage did not become sentimental. It became steadier. There are still misunderstandings, still differences in temperament, still days when old memories surface, but they no longer define her position. She made a clear decision. She would not live on probation in her own life. She would govern her tone. She would speak when something mattered. She would let God shape the present instead of arguing with the past. In the Lord alone are deliverance and strength. Not in flawless history. Not in prolonged self-punishment. Not in careful silence. It is never too late to begin again. Not by rewriting what happened, but by standing upright again with clarity and dignity. That is mature completion. And it is enough. Before we close, I would value your perspective. What did you think of her decision to stop living on probation in her own marriage? Would you have handled it differently? And if you are comfortable sharing, has guilt ever quietly shaped your behavior long after forgiveness was offered? You do not need to share private details. Thoughtful reflections often help other women see their own patterns more clearly. Many here are navigating long marriages and layered histories. Your insight may help someone else choose clarity over silence. I read your comments carefully, and I am grateful for the steadiness you bring to this space.